Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Christian, and today our conversation and our talk will be in English for obvious reasons because of the topic. So we're super happy that you guys are connected right now. Part of what I do at Nearsoft is to create events for the community, the IT community, as talks, workshops, and meetups. And as you guys may know, we cannot do that right now for safety reasons. So we're trying to find a way to connect with the community, with you guys. And this is the way we found to have talks every Thursday. So every month is a different topic, as you guys can read on social media. This month is about soft skills, and today is actually our second talk, and we're super happy for that. Today we have with us Kim Lentis. Kim is part of the operations team here at Nearsoft, and I think today we can learn a lot from her, not just because she's a native speaker, but also because her work has been focused on communication needs inside the organization. She has collaborated in different projects. One of them is the Hub, which is Nearsoft's repository with internal information. The other one is the Dojo. And also she helps a lot of candidates to make mock interviews so they can practice their English. And so when they come with the real interview with our clients, they can have success in the interview. So you can learn a lot from her today. So let's hear what she's going to say to us today. Kim, thank you for being here with us, and this space is all yours.
Thank you. Thank you for that nice introduction, Christian. I appreciate it. And way to go. See you guys. English is Christian's second language, and he did great. So like he said, my name is Kim. Nice to have you here. Thank you for dedicating your time to me. Yes, English is my first language. I was born and raised in the United States. However, I have been living in Hermosillo, Sonora for 15 years, 1-5. My husband is the reason love brought me here. But like you, I know what it is to learn a second language later on in life, right? También hablo español. But yeah, so here at Nearsoft, one of the facets of internal communication is our Communication Enhancement Program. Okay, we really feel and know that communication and soft skills are just as important as those hard skills, as those technical skills, particularly when you're having to work cross-culturally or in a bilingual sort of environment, right? At Nearsoft, we always set out to set ourselves apart, right? To be innovative. And this communication space is one way in which we can do that. So part of our program, we actually offer something called one-on-one English dojitos, right? This immersive area where we can work together with people who are interested in improving their English skills. And so what you're going to see today is actually the first couple sessions that we go through with our participants, our Nearsoftians. And yeah, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm sorry, I have to flip my screen. Here we go. All right. So why is this important? This is one of the first conversations that we have with our Nearsoftians. What's it to you? All right. The first thing is we really want to encourage people to get into this habit of self-improvement, right? So as software engineers, as developers, you guys are really, really great, right, at this self-teaching. You do it all the time. You want to switch a stack, something new comes out, you're curious. So the first thing we want to do is just, why not do that same thing, those skills that you already know, and apply it somewhere else, such as your English. The idea also is we just want to get comfortable and confident with our English, right? It's not necessarily English class, grammar, what tense are we going to go over today? It's more just conversing and getting used to using what we already know. Of course, we already talked about this idea of enhancing our communication skills and our soft skills, which is going to take you a long way in all facets of life. And finally, it's a way to just add value to yourself, to your community, to your company, and to your clients. And again, the better your English is, the better this is going to serve you where you are now or wherever your future takes you. This idea of how do you go about doing this? You know, it can feel really overwhelming. It's very hard to learn a second language, particularly as adults, right? There's actually biologically, scientifically, a part of our brain that shuts off right around the 12-year mark that makes learning language more challenging. So we have this very common saying in English, right? It's this idea of how do you eat an elephant? How do you accomplish something that's just this huge, overbearing task? And the answer is one bite at a time, right? So I want to remind you that if you could really just find 5 or 10 minutes a day to be intentional with your English, over the course of a year, you're actually accumulating 30 hours of practice, which is significant. So don't discredit these tiny little step-by-step things, these little changes that you can do in your life to get better. First tip. What's the first tip to stepping up our English? Number 1, you have to see yourself as an English speaker. Okay, this is a mental shift that has to take place. Right? It sounds very simple, but it means a lot. When you can see yourself no longer as an English learner, but as somebody who speaks English, you're going to find a lot of freedom and just the ability to relax and to actually push forward. It's a very small change, but think about it. Okay, this is a very relatively famous quote from Henry Ford. He's the founder of Ford Motor Company. And he says, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Right? So if you're telling yourself, English is so hard, I'm always going to have an accent, English is so hard, I'm never going to remember this word, I'm always going to speak in the present tense, I'm never going to get to use other tenses, then you're probably right? You've already defeated yourself. So see yourself as that English speaker that you aspire to be. Number 2, you need to find your courage. Okay, even if you think that you're making a mistake, keep speaking anyway. And worst of all, don't let the fear of saying something wrong stop you from speaking at all. This is very important when you're working cross-culturally, in teams, in a different language, right? What you can bring to the table, right? Your ideas are worth it. So if you stop and hold yourself back from sharing those ideas because you're afraid of how you might sound, you're losing out, your team is losing out, the company is losing out. And there's this idea of wanting to put the shoe on the other foot. It's one of those idioms, right? Every language has them. What does this mean? Put yourself in the other person's place, all right? So let's say, yo voy a hablar contigo en español. Ok, es obvio que tengo un acento. No puedo pasar ni un solo día aquí en México sin que alguien me dice, no eres de aquí, ¿verdad? Ok, pero bueno, está bien. Pero cuando estoy hablando contigo, me estás juzgando. Te sientes molesto. No me vas a ayudar si tengo dudas o tengo una pregunta o me equivoco. No me vas a corregir. Claro que sí lo vas a hacer. So this is exactly what English speakers are going to do for you, right? You don't have to be afraid. We're here to help. We're here to encourage you. We're here to lead you along, fill in those gaps, right? And maybe there's this small portion of the population who is annoyed, who doesn't have the patience. But you know what? They're jerks. So forget about them anyway. You don't care what they think, right? Be courageous. Number 3, now this is a big one. You have to accept that English is weird. And this rule probably applies to any language, okay? It's language, it's communication. We're not talking about mathematics or physics, computer programming, right? It's something that sits in this nice little box with these nice little rules. So this can be something that's really challenging, particularly for the engineer types to get used to. But we have to, okay? Take this coffee mug, for example. Now, it's kind of this sadistic thing that I do when we're in our one-on-ones. I force somebody to try to pronounce and walk their way through this coffee mug. Let me read it for you. Okay, so it says, yes, English can be weird, right? It can be understood through tough, thorough, thought, though. So we have through. The O-U-G-H spelling is going ooh. We have tough. So the O-U-G-H is making uff. We have thorough. So it's ooh, uff, o. Thought, aw, and though. Back to the O. So we have ooh, uff, thorough, and ah. Okay? 4 freaking sounds from the same freaking spelling. Why? I don't know. Why is the word read in the present tense, read, and read in the past tense, but spelled the same way, right? Why is the plural of mouse, mice, and the plural of house, houses? We don't know. It's weird, okay? So if you try to find a rule and understand every single thing, you're going to drive yourself crazy. You're not going to advance. So when you come to these weird and unexplainable things, memorize the weirdness and move on, right? Be okay with this. Number 4, diving into the deep end. Here we go with those idioms again, okay? What does this mean? Okay, this is usually a reference to a swimming pool. Most swimming pools have the shallow end where you can easily touch, right, where the kids play. And then you have the deep end where you can no longer touch the bottom. This is where you get to dive into the pool, right? So what's this idea here? This idea that if we stay in the shallows where it's safe, where it's easy, right, we're never going to become a better swimmer, right? And you can take your time and you can, play it safe and come in. But if you just immerse yourself, right, immerse yourself in as much English as possible, challenge yourself to be listening to read and to write and to say things in English that you think might even be more difficult for you than what you're capable of doing, okay? Go for it. What's the worst thing that can happen? That you have to back up a little bit, right? But one way to do this is to start thinking about how are you already incorporating English into your lives, right? The standard answers are, I like to watch television series, I like to watch movies, I read books, or I like to listen to music. A lot of people are gamers, right? There's the video game element. Writing, not so much, right? Usually our writing is limited to emails or documentation for work or texting. So how might you dive in? Okay, how might you push yourself or challenge yourself to go a little farther, right? So if you're watching movies or if you're watching television, turn off the Spanish subtitles, turn on the English subtitles, or better yet, try it without subtitles at all, okay? That's really gonna help your listening, right? If you're reading, first of all, try to read something that's a little outside of your comfort zone, right? So maybe you're used to reading technical books, coding books, something like that. Try a novel, right? There's really great literature in the English language. After you've read it and you're coming down to the end of your few minutes, take a section, read it out loud, get your mouth practicing, get your tongue moving, right? If you're listening to music, try writing down the lyrics. If you're a gamer, join those game rooms where it's an all English game room, right? Switch all of your electronic devices into English, right? Maybe take a course in something that's presented in English, right? Not an English course, but a programming course in the English language. Listen to podcasts. Just see how you can really push yourself. Number 5, knowing that grammar isn't everything. Now, this is important, right? Fluency isn't perfect English grammar. Even native English speakers make grammar mistakes. Most native English speakers don't know why, could name even what the pronouns are. That's okay, right? Remember here, this is all about your ability to be able to effectively communicate, right? To be able to express your thoughts, your feelings, and your ideas on your resumes. Forget about this idea of, I have 80% English. What does it even mean, right? Like you can define 80% of the words in the dictionary. What is 80% English? That doesn't make sense, right? But rather, I am able to host a conversation in English. I am able to present in English. I can write well-documented emails, documentation. What are these skills that you're able to do? But beyond that, we want to focus not just on when do I use this tense, when do I use that tense, but think about your language in the real world. So think about those spaces where you have to use English, right? Is it in your daily stand-ups? Is it in your weeklies? Are you having retrospectives? When is it? And think about those phrases that you use commonly in Spanish, or those words that you're like, gosh, I really wish I could say this thing. What's the equivalent of this? And start discovering, right, those equivalents and start incorporating them. It doesn't all have to be grammar, grammar, grammar. Number 6, time to get creative, all right? Realize that there's always more than one way to express something, right? So even if you don't know a word, even if you have what I call a brain fart, right? You go blank and you're like, what is this word? You can get your idea across by thinking creatively and using other words, okay? So how can we do this? It's the thing that's the opposite of down. Up? Yes, right? It's similar to running, but you're going at a slower pace. Jogging? Yes, jogging, okay? It's a place where you do this thing, or it's something that you use to accomplish. Okay, so go ahead and try this. If you get stuck, be creative, keep going, push forward. Use it or lose it. So this goes with anything, right? And if we're out of practice, if we stop practicing an ability, we're likely to forget it or at least become, less good at it. So the best way to remember anything is to use it right away so it'll stay in your memory. So let's go back to this idea of being creative. So let's say there's a word that if somebody says this word, you recognize it, you know the meaning, and you want to incorporate this word into your vocabulary, but it always escapes you. In my personal experience with Spanish, this word for me was abrumada, okay, overwhelmed. I feel overwhelmed very often. And so when people would ask me, ay, Kim, ¿cómo has estado? ¿Cómo estás? Ay, me siento cansada, como preocupada, como hay mucho que hacer, pero no recuerdo cómo es esa palabra. Abrumada. Sí, abrumada, me siento abrumada. So what I had to do is abrumada, abrumada, abrumada. I would drill this word, I would use this word until it stuck, and now I can easily pull the word abrumada out of my Spanish hat, okay? So think of those words, the few words that you get stuck on, write them down, put a note app on your phone, carry around a tiny little English notebook. And whenever those good words pop up, whenever those phrases that you get stuck on happen, write them down, pick one or two target words or phrases a week, work on them, use them when you can, and then move on to the next one. Number 8, think and speak out loud. Okay, real fluency. Remember, this is all about communicating effectively. This begins when we're not just speaking in English, but also thinking in English, when we don't have to do that whole translation bit, okay? So when your mind is clear and you're not busy, try narrating your day or making up a conversation. Okay? This is something that I used to do with my daughter when she was really little, before she even spoke at all. But she might be, for example, sitting in her high chair playing, and it would be time for me to make breakfast. And I would just walk through and talk through everything that I was doing. Okay, Camila, we're going to make breakfast. Let's go get the eggs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 eggs, right? And I would just be talking and talking and talking with her. This is something that you can do. Narrate your actions, right? And you can do this either in the first person, like I'm opening the refrigerator, I'm grabbing the milk, or you could do it in the third person, right? She is opening the refrigerator, she is grabbing the milk, to kind of get that going. You can also think and speak out loud through a conversation they're anticipating having, right? If you're coming up on an interview, practice out loud. If you know today you're having a daily while you're taking a shower, or well, every day you have a daily, right? But maybe it's your retro. So you're taking a shower and you're going to verbalize what you want to say in the retro out loud while you're showering, right? Think of the space of where you can practice. So you can really do this anywhere, in the shower, when you're cooking, when you're driving in your car to work, right? Just think. Who cares if people look at you and you're talking to yourself, right? We don't care if we look like crazies. We're improving our English. All right. Get more out of listening to spoken English, right? If you're listening to this talk, chances are that you've kind of pushed past the comprehension, right? Doesn't mean you understand everything, right? Maybe if it's a native English speaker, the accent's funny, this person talks really fast, whatever that might be. But comprehension is probably not the major area for you. So now that you comprehend most of what's being said, it's time to stop and to listen to not just what words mean, but to focus on how people are saying them, right? Take the time to imitate how people are saying them. So if you have a favorite television show, or if you have a YouTuber that you like to follow, somebody who's like, they speak really well, listen to them, pause it, imitate it, see what they're doing. Where's the rise? Where's the fall? Where are they speaking faster? Where are they emphasizing words? Are they saying things like gonna? or see ya instead of going to or see you. These are the types of things that we can begin incorporating, okay? The idea here isn't to like dumb down your English, right? The idea here is to actually sound more natural, and that's just going to lift this perception that other people have of your English language abilities. And finally, number 10, this idea of learning English from everyone. Right? Anyone who speaks English can help you practice. All right? Take advantage of that opportunity to practice and learn English from English speakers around you, okay? Now, this does not have to be native English speakers, right? This can be anyone who speaks English, independent of their level of English. The idea here isn't to teach one another or to correct one another. Okay, if you have that ability and you want to interject something, by all means, do that. But the idea is just to have this partner, this place to practice. Because the more you're speaking, the more you're doing it, the easier it's going to be. You know, you're getting that muscle memory in the pronunciation. You're able to identify your areas that you have trouble with, write them down in your little notebook, right? This is the point, right? So if you have a husband or a wife or a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a roommate, your coworkers who also speak English, set up a little deal. Like, you know what? Every day at breakfast, it's English only. We're only going to talk in English. Or the first half an hour of our date is always going to be English, right? And just strike it up, see what happens. You can also encourage yourself to join some online communities, right? There's some really great ones out there like speaking24.com, speaky.com, italki, where you can find other people like yourself who are interested in conversing in English. And hey, you get to make a new friend out of the deal too. So now that we've talked about 10 ways to step up your English, there's just a few things that I would like to mention about what you should stop doing, right? Number 1, if this is your thing, stop with the negative self-talk, right? Oh, my accent sucks, right? Oh, I always screw up the ED pronunciation in the past tense, right? It's good to identify our improvement areas, right? Don't beat yourself up, right? Go back to this idea of if you think you can, you can. So positive self-talk. And rather than I can't do this, think about 6 months ago, I had this trouble and now I do this. 6 months ago, I was too afraid to have a conversation and now I converse just fine. Stop waiting for the right time to improve your English, all right? No procrastinating anymore. Just 5 minutes a day. Double it, 10 minutes a day. Now it's instead of 30 hours, it's 60, okay? Just make this little teeny space. Be creative in the activities that you can do and start doing them. Stop saying no and say yes more often, all right? So for example, let's say you're in a restaurant and you hear a couple, tourists speaking in English. Approach them, introduce yourself. Hey, how are you enjoying Mexico, right? It's okay. Instead of, I don't have anything to say. Right? Take advantage of those opportunities. Maybe somebody has invited you to present at a conference, but it's English speaking only, right? Challenge yourself. Stop with ridiculous expectations. Native speakers shouldn't be your North Star, okay? It's not your first language. It's very unlikely, it's extremely difficult to reach a native speaker of any language status. Can people do it? Do people do it? Yes. Should this be your goal? Probably not, all right? We want to, remember, eat that elephant one bite at a time, which comes down to this idea of stop consuming too much content, all right? If we're just blitzing ourselves with YouTube videos, reading grammar books and whatever else, it's going to overwhelm us, and that knowledge without any application is lost. So instead, choose these little small target areas. I'm going to work on my ED pronunciation when I'm speaking in the past tense. Once you've got that down pat, pick something else, all right? And keep moving forward. And finally, and this is kind of what we touched on already when we were talking about diving into the deep end, stop with the passive learning of English, all right? We can't just be reading and we can't just be listening, okay? We need to begin speaking and we need to begin writing, all right? We need to encourage ourselves to be creating English as much as possible. So that's it, you guys. I'm coming. Woof, I made it like right at the half an hour mark. Thank you so much for your time today. So how about it? What do you think? Where are those 5 minutes? Go ahead and do it. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you so much. So now we're gonna go to the questions, if that's okay.
Perfect.
Um,
If there are any.
yeah, we have some here, so don't worry. The first question is there any place where we can practice our pronunciation? Like a tool, I
Yes.
think, right?
Um, there actually, I there is a YouTuber. Her name is Hadar Shemesh, and she has a channel called The Accents Way. The Accents Way, like possessive. And she's amazing. I'm like a total groupie. I follow her. She helps me a lot, actually, her ideas and her videos with content and ideas of how I actually get to help Nearsoftians. If pronunciation is your goal, follow that channel. She's great. Follow her also on her website, and you get these, I think, weekly emails, and they're amazing. She doesn't overwhelm you, like, lots of spam and everything. Super approachable. And what's really cool about Hadar is that English is her second language.
Oh,
So you're going to
really?
watch this coach who's coaching people on pronunciation in her second language, and she's absolutely fantastic. And she's Israeli. Ignorantly, I don't know, what is it, Hebrew that's spoken in Israel? Sorry, I should know this. But English is her second language, and she does a fantastic job. And the main focus of that channel is pronunciation.
What's her name again? Just to remember.
Her name is Hadar,
Okay.
Hadar, and her last name is Shamesh,
Oh my God.
Shamesh, I think. But the channel is The Accents, ECCENTS, like apostrophe S, plural, like possessive, The Accents Way.
Okay, great. Okay, next question. Does pronunciation matters much?
I say yes and no. Okay, this is what I think. There's no shame in having an accent. No shame whatsoever. It's a part of your identity. It helps people know, right? Like me living in Mexico. No eres de aquí, ¿verdad? ¿De dónde eres? And people ask this not because, like, God, who is this person? I can't converse with you. But rather, like, like, who are you? What's your story? What are you doing here? And that's a source of pride, right? Also, it's like, wow, like, it's not your first language and you're speaking this language. Cool, congratulations. So there's no shame whatsoever in having an accent. I think it's part of your identity, part of your story. But if your pronunciation is causing problems in communication, right? If you are finding that people are consistently saying, I'm sorry, could you please repeat that? What? Is this what you said? Or you're consistently getting the like smile and nod. Okay, then it's an indicator that you probably should focus a bit on your pronunciation. But to have this goal of I want zero accent, I think it's a lofty goal. I think it's an admirable goal. But I think there's several other goals that you should have right before then. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, you did. Don't worry. Yeah. Next question is why some factories care so much about perfect grammar? I think factories they're trying to say companies in general, right?
Okay, could you please repeat the question? Why who?
Why some factories care so much about perfect grammar? Which factories would be companies, I guess, like any company.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. The answer is I don't know. I
Because they're
think
so
that
picky.
again, it has to come down to grammar. Are you able to be understood? And I think yes, grammar is important. When I say don't focus on it too much, I don't mean don't focus on it at all, right? We need to, it's an area of improvement. We of course want to structure our sentences correctly, have that subject verb agreement, conjugate verbs into the right tenses, use the proper pronouns, right? One of the things I think that's difficult is sometimes people refer to women as he's and men as she's, and that can get confusing. So it is important to have good grammar. Why would this be the main focus? I don't know. I think perhaps it's just this traditional way in which language has always been taught. But I really feel the most effective way is yes, to have a foundation in that grammar and to be looking at it, but to be looking at it in a context that actually gets people talking and moving. Because why? That's how we naturally learn language, right? I don't sit down with my 2.5-year-old and say, Zoe, today we're going to go over the present tense. No, she just listens and she emulates, right? And she mimics. And the closer I think that we can get to that natural learning process, the better it is for us. But if something happens when we become adults, right? And we going back to this idea of like, what's the rule? It's weird. And it's okay. Like there's different learning methods, right? Some people are more visual, some people are audio, some people are kinetic, right? They want to touch, they want to feel. And there's something in us, I think, as adults that wants to have that structure, that needs to have that process, that formula, and that's all right. So don't discredit the grammar, but I would encourage you to actually focus on using your English rather than waiting until it's perfect to get started.
Yeah, or maybe if it's a primary requirement for the role, that would be justified. But yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, and I think too, like, I mean, I'm not discrediting tests. I think they're great, like TOEFL and whatever else. But sometimes what happens on paper isn't a reflection of what somebody's able to do in real life, and vice versa, right? So some people do really, really well in exams, like book, like fill in the blank or whatever, but to converse with them,
So
they struggle.
yeah.
And vice versa, like, gosh, I can't take a test, but I sure can talk. And I think in real world, that ability to talk is much more valuable than that ability to take a test, right? Of course, if your job is to fill in this role of, if you're documenting things, if you have to, create content, be an outward facing position for a company, then yes, real grammar, good grammar is very important because we're judged by that, right? I, as a native English speaker, can go onto a website or go onto something and I can immediately tell you, like, this is not from a English speaking origin. And in some ways, this affects the trustworthiness, right, of that website or that product or whatever it may be. So yes, it is important, I think, but more in those public facing, outward facing roles than necessarily internally.
Yeah, great. Luis Reyes asks, what do you recommend to improve thinking in English?
Hi, Luis. Thank you for your question. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things. First of all, like I said, you can narrate your day. I think that's the first step. To move from the Spanish or whatever language into the English, or in my case, English to Spanish. I think conversing, finding a space and people that are safe with you, that you can trust, that you feel free to make mistakes with, writing. And I think when we're writing and we're doing things, again, the goal isn't to be perfect, but just to kind of get it out there. Just like you would as if you were writing something in Spanish, right? Just start typing or writing, right, with the pen, and go back, and then you can fix it. And it's kind of fun because you can track yourself too. Like you can go backwards and be like, oh my gosh, look how all these mistakes that I made a year ago, and now I don't make those mistakes anymore, and ha ha hee hee. But conversing, writing, again, it's anything you can do to get yourself out of this passive element of just consuming English, whether that's with audio, right, with your ears, or with reading, and then actually get yourself producing it. So maybe if you've read something, challenge yourself to write an opinion about it, right? If you watched a movie, write a review and publish that, right? Just start creating in English.
Yeah. So next question is William. He asks, what about American English versus UK English? Any tip about it? I don't know if it's about the accent or...
Yeah, here I think it comes down to this idea of, actually there's one individual that I do the dojitos, the one-on-one English with. He's originally from Malaysia. He now lives in Mexico. And in Malaysia, their English education, right, is British English versus American English. And I don't think it's anything about one being better than the other. I think it has to do with the proximity. Which one is more useful for you? So if you're living in Europe, then it's probably going to be in your benefit to be more familiar, right, with British English. If you're living and working in Mexico, most of our interaction, right, is with the United States. So American English, accent, vocabulary, because there are differences, is going to probably be in your best interest. Who are your clients, who you're interacting with the most, right? If you live in a tourist area, where do the majority of those English speaking tourists come from? So you can take those things into consideration. But it's certainly not one is any better than the other. It's just different. And this idea of which one is going to be most beneficial to me and my needs, right? And kind of go toward that goal. As far as if the accent, if you're interacting with, let's say, a person from New England, or not New England, that's the United States, from England or Great Britain, right? And the accent is challenging for you, or anybody, right, who's speaking in English with a strong accent, I would approach this with this idea of, first of all, working on your listening skills, right? Some of these techniques. First of all, understanding, okay, this is hard. And if you're going to get into a meeting, clearing your brain, okay, this is coming. Also, this idea of whatever exterior factors you could eliminate, like make sure that you have, you're able to listen and hear well, right? One thing is hearing and one thing is listening. Hearing is the physical, pick up hearing of what's happening, and listening is this idea of comprehending what is happening. So if somebody has bad auditory, their mic's not working, or there's a lot of background noise or whatever, and they're already challenging for you to understand, then those things are going to make it even more challenging. So you can have that, face-to-face honest conversation of, hey, can you use a microphone? You yourself use a headset, whatever you can do to remove exterior factors, that's going to be in your benefit. Have those honest conversations as well. Like, it's challenging for me. Could you please slow down? Whatever that might be, you can have those conversations as well. And then, of course, I think one of the biggest things is this idea of note-taking. So when you're having this conversation with this person, kind of write down the most important elements. Write note-taking, like just bullet points. You're not going to be able to write down everything they say, or you're going to get lost. And then at the end of that conversation, you can always come back with, I just want to have a recap, make sure that I got all of this correct, and recap that. And another thing that you can do is practice in that target accent, okay? So for example, if you have a lot of teammates who are from India and their English speaking accent is a challenge for you, what you can do is find content where people with Indian accents are speaking in English, of course, and just practice listening to them, and even practice that note-taking technique, right? And maybe at the end of that TED Talk, right, make a summary of it. How well did I get this? Find TED Talks, movies, television shows where people with that target accent of yours, if comprehension is the thing, and just keep listening and practice, drill it.
Okay, great. So let's move on to the next question. Manu is actually watching your talk. Hello, Manu.
Manu was one of my one-on-one Dojito participants, you guys.
Yeah, he was. And he writes us, and he's making a question also. Your tips and lessons have been ramping up my career. One of the things most important has been thinking instead of translate. Also, what about the sentence stress rules?
I think I'm understanding. Oh, first of all, Manu, right? Thank you. That feels so great. That's awesome. I think you're talking about where to stress in a sentence, like how to sound more natural, if I'm understanding that question. This is not my expertise. I have to admit that I've never studied this or don't teach this often, but I think this element often. But what I think is this idea, again, of picking that target language and just listening for those things. And also thinking about, intonation can change from language to language, right? In my opinion, without being like a linguistics expert or anything, the emphasis in the way that we speak in Spanish and the way that we're speaking in English is not all that different, right? So the same way of like, ¿cómo estás? Like, we have this rise, we have this fall. Or we emphasize like, no dijo eso, right? So those same things like, no, he didn't say that, right? So you can see that it's all kind of emphasizing and putting itself together in those same ways. So listen to that and mimic that. I think one of the best ways to do this is to actually record yourself, right? I know it feels a little weird. Nobody likes to see them. Well, few people like to see themselves on camera. Like, I'm probably not going to rewatch this YouTube, right? Like, but this idea of pick something like a short little skit or sketch from like a television show, or perhaps a TED talk of somebody who you think's like a really great presenter, and listen to what they're doing and how they're doing it. Actually, on that Accents Way channel, Hadar does this really great breakdown of a TED talk by Chandra Crud. She's this lady who's like really great at writing TV. I think I'm having a blank, but if you go to her YouTube channel, you're probably going to be able to find it. We can put it here in the comments of this as well. But she really breaks it down, and you can just train yourself to begin listening to those things. Stop, record yourself, try to say it the way that this person is saying it. Play back the original, play back your recording, and compare the two, and just keep playing around with it.
Okay, then we have one more question from Manu, actually. What would you
Go for it, Manu.
recommend for sounding like a native speaker? Oh gosh.
Yeah, that one's really hard. Like I said, I think it's a really lofty goal. It's an admirable goal. I'm not going to tell you not to shoot for that star. But I think what we need to do is realize that it's going to take a lot of time. And it's one of those things that most people aren't capable of accomplishing. And I don't tell you this, right, to discourage you by any means. But I think to sound like a native speaker probably comes down to being able to be natural. And again, obviously you have to have a strong grammatical foundation. It doesn't have to be perfect. Even as native speakers, we screw up sometimes, right? I was actually just going over this with somebody. I was recalling this movie that was made in the early 2000s. It was like Robert Downey Jr.'s comeback movie. It's called Kiss, Kiss, Bang, Bang. It's a great movie, completely underrated. If you haven't seen it, watch it. But there's this element where he's talking about adverbs, and he says, "Oh, I feel badly," and she's like, "No, you feel bad, because if it were feeling badly, then that would mean that the mechanism which allows you to feel is broken." And then later on, somebody tells him, sleep bad, and he's like, no, sleep badly, and he's like, no, sleep bad, but the correct way is actually sleep badly. No, God, now I'm confused. It really is sleep badly, not sleep bad. And so anyway, it's confusing. Even native English speakers get confused. So we have to have this strong grammar foundation, but I think more than anything, it has to do with the naturalness, right? The ease in which you're able to converse, and your ability to pick up on and emulate even the slightest nuances. Things like gonna instead of going to, or even using instead of place, right? All of those things. Like, what are these breaks that people are using in their language? Idioms, jokes. And I think this is also where it's not just a language component, but it's a cultural component, right? So to really get to that native English level, we also need to start paying attention to pop culture, not just what's going on now, but what's really pop culture from what has happened in the past, right? So, like, if you don't know who Marilyn Monroe is, or James Dean, or basic history of World War II, or, things like this, that it's like very, very, and this is me speaking from, of course, an American standpoint. Pop culture, if you're, working with somebody from Great Britain or something, is going to be different. But whatever that target language is, it's not just about language. It's also about the entire culture. And those are those things that are going to make that difference to really get you to the native level.
Great. We have two more questions and we're
Sure.
done. Could you
We
please?
still got 10 more minutes, right? Technically, we've got the
Yeah,
hour
we still
slot.
have we have 10 minutes still, but okay. So I just lost the question. Here it is. Yes. Could you please recommend an app for a daily practice? I have used Tandem app.
The one that I've heard a lot about, I have to confess, I actually just downloaded it yesterday, but I haven't had a chance to play around with it. I want to play around with it for mi español. Is Duolingo. I've heard really, really great things about this one. And from when I downloaded it, also, it allows you to choose like the amount of time that you're wanting to spend each day. Like I think they do it like 5, 10, 15, or 20-minute sections or something. But I've heard really, really good things about it. I haven't used it myself, but go for that one. Duolingo.
Okay. And we're going to go with the last question from Juan. Any tip to interact in casual conversations? I mean, during business meeting, it's okay, but when gets too casual, sometimes it's really hard.
Right. This is something that I hear all the time here at Nearsoft. Like, oh, I can talk about tech all day long, but when you ask me what I did last night or what I'm going to do later or what did at Christmas, right, it's hard. I think the idea here is just for, first of all, to find your courage, right? To talk about it anyway. Even if you're not sure what to say, find that courage, keep conversing. And the more you do this, the more comfortable it's going to be. Okay. Um, and I think also just this idea of like, it's no different, right? Whatever small talk you'd be having in Spanish or whatever language your first language is, that same small talk, but for generally those same rules apply, right? So talk about those same things like your family, what you like, what you don't like. You know, are you a dog person? Are you a cat person? And I think it also comes down to this idea of this is one of those things that you could practice with your English buddy, right? This idea of take advantage of anyone around you who speaks English, right? So casual conversation is a challenge for you, Juan. I guarantee that it's a challenge for Juanita also, right? So
Your female
your English
version.
buddy, like, you know, that's this whole idea. Like when we have lunch together, it's only going to be in English. What happens at lunchtime? Casual conversation.
Great.
So it's all about practice.
Yeah. So that would be our last question, Kim. Thank you
All
so much
right.
for being with us today.
You're
Um,
welcome. Thank you for inviting me. I hope that this was helpful for everyone. Again, just take it in small steps. These, you know, tangible elements to really stepping up your English or any language that you're hoping to learn.
Yeah, and thank you guys for joining us today. If you want to get tickets for or the link for the next Thursday talk, just go. You can go to Nearsoft Jobs on Facebook or Instagram. There we put the link where you can register. And thank you all of you for joining us today. And Kim, one more time, thank you for your time. This was great.
De nada.
Bye, you guys. Stay safe.
Bye.